How's it going, everybody? So with Modern Horizons 2 previews being right around the corner, I just wanted to take a look at some of the more notable cards from the first set and talk about their applications in Cube. So for those unaware, Modern Horizons was a brand new product by Wizards of the Coast, printing for the first time cards that would be both modern and legacy legal without passing through standard first. Modern Horizons was released in June of 2019 and caused, to understate, quite a commotion in multiple formats. So today I want to look at 10 of the most notable cards from this set for their potential inclusion in cubes. So obviously a list like this is entirely opinion based, so of course my assessment may vary greatly from yours. So I want to start out with a few honorable mentions before getting into the list. Giver of Runes is a callback to a cube staple in most mono-white archetypes, and I think should have a home in most cubes. Seasoned Pyromancer can potentially be card advantage on top of a decent threat in most red decks. And Echo of Eons is just two Time Twisters wearing a trench coat. I love draw 7s in Cube, and I've had a lot of fun with this one. So breaking into the actual list, at number 10 we have Force of Vigor. This is a 4-mana green instant that can instead be cast for free during an opponent's turn by discarding an additional green card. So cards that allow you to subvert mana cost have pretty much historically been incredible. And this being able to get rid of up to 2 artifacts or enchantments while you're tapped out is really no different. While it may not be the flashiest ability, this is an amazing answer card for cubes that have a lot of powerful artifacts. Coming in at number 9, we have Plague Engineer. Being a fun creature-based take on Engineered Plague from Urza's Legacy, Plague Engineer is a 3-mana 2/2 with Death Touch that reads, as Plague Engineer enters the battlefield, choose a creature type. Creatures of the chosen type get -1/-1. So again, at a glance, this may not seem like the most impressive ability until your opponent gets True Name Nemesis into play and you have no way to deal with it. And when you consider the amount of degenerate 1 toughness creatures this card deals with, the versatility really becomes apparent. And having Death Touch is a great addition to deter combat. So coming in at number 8, we have Hexdrinker. Hexdrinker is a 2/1 snake for 1 green mana with level up. At levels 3 through 7, it becomes a 4/4 with protection from instants, and at level 8, protection from everything, which for the uninitiated or newer players might seem like a pretty interesting line of text, although we have seen this before. So protection from everything means that this can't be touched at all, right? Well, not exactly. Protection is a keyword that doesn't get used much these days. That means a creature can't be the target of spells or abilities, can't be blocked by other creatures, dealt damage, or equipped or enchanted by auras or artifacts. So cards like Damnation or Forced Sacrifice abilities like Liliana the Veil can still get around protection. In most green decks in Cube, you're going to have a ton of extra mana to pump into this also. And while it's a card I don't actually currently have in my vintage Cube, after drafting this a few times on the Magic Online Cube, I'm definitely going to try this out. At number 7, I have a card that I'm sure a lot of people would have placed a lot higher on this list, and that's Force of Negation. A 3-mana blue instant that counters a non-creature spell and exiles that spell instead of putting it into the graveyard. If it's not your turn, you may exile a blue card from your hand rather than pay the 3 mana, calling back to arguably the most powerful counterspell ever printed, Force of Will. So it's hard to argue against this card's power, however I think I would value it a bit more if it could be cast during your own turn, although I understand that would probably be a bit too powerful for Modern. So coming in at number 6, we actually have our first common on the list. Ephemerate is an instant for 1 white mana that is a flicker ability for a creature you control, and it has Rebound, effectively tripling enter the battlefield abilities on any creatures you have. So this card is absolutely insane in any cube with decent ETB creatures. Think cards like Eternal Witness, Blade Splicer, or Muldrifter to pair with this. The value honestly just kind of gets out of hand. And at number 5, we actually have a cycle of 5 lands, and those are of course the Horizon lands, the Canopy lands, whatever you choose to call these. These are the enemy colored half of a cycle that was started in Future Sight with the card Horizon Canopy. So these are all lands that tap for one of 2 colors at the cost of 1 life. and they have the added benefit of being able to sacrifice them to draw a card, which is just great utility to have on a land, especially in colors like red and white that often empty their hands early on and don't have too many ways to refuel. Moving on to number 4 is a card that actually flew under my radar when the set first came out that has since proven to be an absolute house in my cube, and that's Fallen Shinobi. Fallen Shinobi is a 5/4 zombie ninja for 3, a blue and a black, that reads, when Fallen Shinobi deals combat damage to a player, that player exiles the top 2 cards of their library. Until end of turn, you may play those cards without paying their mana costs, which is fine on its own, but ninjutsu really pushes this card over the top for me, allowing you to return an unblocked attacking creature you control to your hand to put this card into play tapped and attacking for only 4 mana. So cards like this are really only as strong as your opponent's deck. However, in Vintage Cube, it's entirely possible to deal 5 damage, cast an Eldrazi, and say Ancestral Recall for only 4 mana, which, while not the most likely scenario, regardless, the ceiling on this card is incredibly high. So breaking into the top portion of this list, I think the order becomes less and less important, as all of these cards are honestly just kind of ridiculous. With that being said, my pick for number 3 is Renin 6. So Renin 6 is a 2 mana Gruul Planeswalker. Renin 6 has the +1 ability to return a land from your graveyard to your hand, which pairs incredibly well with lands like Strip Mine or Wasteland, as well as fetch lands for great fixing. The -1 on this card is probably the least used ability, dealing 1 damage to any target, which is still great utility for a 2 mana Planeswalker. And if you can manage to get to the ultimate, instants and sorceries you cast have Retrace, which is a keyword that, again, hasn't really been used too much lately, that allows you to cast the card from your graveyard by discarding a land in addition to paying its mana cost, which, if you've been plussing long enough, it's super easy to recast Lightning Bolt enough times for it to just be lethal. I think this card goes best in cubes with a lands matter theme built in. In my Vintage Cube, Jund Lands is one of my favorite decks to draft, and this card is absolutely incredible in that deck. So my pick for number 2 is Urza, Lord High Artificer, which does just everything. Being one of the most powerful Magic characters in the lore of the game, Wizards really had to push this card, and I feel like they did a great job here. So Urza is a 1/4 human artificer for 2 and 2 blue that not only turns all of your artifacts into Mox Sapphires, but also creates a 0/0 artifact token that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And if that weren't enough, for 5 mana, you can also shuffle your library, exile the top card, and cast it without paying its mana cost. So there's really so many ways you can just generate a ton of mana and cast your entire library with this card, but it's also just a great value piece in a lot of artifact heavy decks. And overall for me, this is probably the most fun card from this set to draft. So my pick for number 1 isn't the flashiest or the most exciting card, but it definitely has the most utility. Prismatic Vista is a land that lets you pay 1 life and search your library for any basic land card and put it into play, effectively making this an untapped land of whatever color it needs to be. It's a super early pick for me that ends up in pretty much any multicolored deck, and while it may not be the card that wins the game, it's definitely a great piece of fixing that I'd honestly say a lot of times is better than any of the other fetch lands in a vacuum. While yes, you can't fetch dual lands with this, it is still a 5-color land when it needs to be. So these have been my top 10 picks for Modern Horizon cards to include in your cube. Do you agree with these picks? Do you agree with the order of these picks? Tell me your other thoughts in the comments below, and of course leave a like, comment any suggestions for future top 10s or other content in general. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I'm actually thinking about branching out into other aspects of the game at some point, possibly making some videos about other formats or even lore. So be sure to let me know in the comments if that's something you'd possibly be interested in. And as always, thanks for watching.